On August 24, 2024, Israeli fighter jets launched airstrikes on several towns in southern Lebanon. These strikes resulted in the tragic loss of 8 lives, including a young child. The attacks have drawn widespread condemnation and fueled existing tensions in the region. Al Jazeera, citing sources on the ground, reported that the strikes targeted areas suspected of harboring Hezbollah infrastructure and operatives. The aftermath of the strikes revealed scenes of devastation with buildings reduced to rubble. Rescue workers searched frantically for survivors amidst the debris, while local residents expressed shock and fear. The situation remains tense, with the potential for further escalation looming large. The international community has expressed grave concern over the escalating violence and the rising civilian death toll. The strikes mark a significant escalation in the ongoing conflict between Israel and Hezbollah, a powerful political and military organization based in Lebanon. The incident has sparked fears of a wider conflict erupting in the already volatile region. The Israeli military claimed responsibility for the airstrikes. They targeted Hezbollah cells and infrastructure tied to the group's military capabilities. Israel released footage showing a strike on a building allegedly used by Hezbollah. Hezbollah, designated as a terrorist organization by Israel, has a long history of conflict with Israel. The recent airstrikes are seen as a response to escalating tensions along the Israel-Lebanon border. Both sides have engaged in a dangerous game of tit-for-tat, exchanging fire and threats. The Israeli airstrikes in Lebanon are not an isolated incident, but rather a symptom of the broader regional instability plaguing the Middle East. The region has long been grappling with a multitude of conflicts, each with its own complex web of actors, interests, and historical grievances. The ongoing civil war in Syria, now in its second decade, has created a breeding ground for extremism and regional instability. The conflict has drawn in regional and global powers, further fueling the violence and complicating efforts to find a peaceful resolution. Adding to the complexity, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict continues to simmer, with periodic flare-ups of violence threatening to ignite a wider conflagration. The recent 11-day conflict between Israel and Hamas in Gaza, which resulted in significant casualties and destruction, is a stark reminder of the fragility of peace in the region. The situation in Lebanon adds another layer of complexity to an already volatile mix, raising fears that any miscalculation or escalation could have far-reaching consequences. In the wake of the Israeli airstrikes in Lebanon, the international community has responded with concern and condemnation. The United Nations has issued urgent calls for restraint, urging all parties to avoid further escalation. The United States supports Israel's right to defend itself, but also calls for de-escalation and dialogue. Other countries emphasize the need for diplomacy to prevent further suffering. The situation highlights the need for a sustainable solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The Israeli government has defended its airstrikes in Lebanon, arguing that they were necessary to protect its citizens from what it perceives as an imminent threat posed by Hezbollah. Israeli officials have pointed to Hezbollah's growing military capabilities, including its vast arsenal of rockets and missiles, as evidence of its malign intentions. They argue that Hezbollah's presence in southern Lebanon, along Israel's northern border, poses an unacceptable risk to Israeli civilians. They view Hezbollah's attacks, including the recent cross-border raid that killed an Israeli soldier, as acts of aggression that cannot be tolerated. Israel maintains that it has the right to defend itself against such threats, and that its actions are justified under international law. They argue that the airstrikes were conducted with precision, targeting only military objectives and minimizing civilian casualties. While facing external threats from Hezbollah and other militant groups, Israel is also grappling with internal divisions that threaten to undermine its social cohesion. Recent protests by ultra-Orthodox Jews against mandatory military service have sparked clashes with police and exposed deep rifts within Israeli society. The protests stem from long-standing grievances over exemptions from military service granted to ultra-Orthodox Jews, who have historically been allowed to pursue religious studies instead of serving in the Israel Defense Forces. The issue has become increasingly contentious in recent years, with many secular Israelis calling for a more equitable system of national service. The protests and the government's response have highlighted the challenges of maintaining unity and a shared sense of purpose in a diverse and often divided society. The internal strife adds another layer of complexity to Israel's challenges as it navigates external threats and internal divisions.